BBC Three Counties Radio.
BBC Three Counties Radio.
Patients with sickle cell disease have begun receiving the first new treatment for the blood disorder in over 20 years. Now, it's a lifelong condition and it mainly affects people with an African or Caribbean background, but it can cause really severe pain and organ failure. Here's our medical editor. What is that word I'm trying to say? Here's our medical editor, Fergus Walsh.
Sickle cell is an inherited condition which causes red blood cells to become distorted, blocking vessels and oxygen flow and triggering excruciating pain. Crizanlizumab, given as a monthly infusion, binds to a protein in blood cells, preventing them sticking together, cutting visits to A&E by 40%. Each vial of the drug costs £1,000, but NHS England has negotiated a confidential discount and hopes to treat up to 5,000 patients over the next 3 years.
So this is really big news, and I want to speak to Orin Lewis OBE, who is the CEO and co-founder of the charity ACLT, which is a bone marrow, blood and organ donation charity. Good afternoon, Orin.
Good afternoon to you.
Oh, this is big news, isn't it?
It is. It's big news insofar as it's the first breakthrough drug in 20 years for treating sickle cell disorder, and it's long awaited. And it's going to give hope to patients in the future in terms of decreasing the amount of sickle cell crisis that they have, which end up with the individual having to go into hospital to have treatment. And so it is positive news, but this, it's, as Fergus Walsh just highlighted very well just now in his summary, it is a small amount of people who are going to benefit initially, but we hope in the future that it will be expanded to become normal treatment on the NHS for all sickle cell patients.
Yes, of course. Now, if anybody's listening and they're not quite aware of how it kind of manifests sickle cell, when you have a sickle cell crisis, can you just talk people through how horrid it is?
Well, it's, speaking to patients who've lived and are living with sickle cell disorder, when they have a crisis, it's basically what's happening is that your red blood cells, which are normally sort of round shaped, start to change shape and turn into a sickle, and it affects the vessels in your bloodstream, and they start to clump up together, and by clumping up, they start to block the flow of oxygen to the vital organs. So we take it for granted that we walking, breathing, feeling okay. That's because our bloodstream is oxygenizing very, very well. When sickle cell happens, by its name, sickle, the cells turn to a sickle shape, and they can't pass through the blood vessels properly. And so, by clumping up, they starve the major organs in your body oxygen, which then creates severe pain reaction in the patient. And if it's very severe, then they will end up going to A&E, going into hospital, having very strong pain-killing treatment to try and alleviate the pain. But it's something that just happens. You can't randomly, you can't actually sort of predict 100% accurate that, when these crises will come. There are certain trigger points like cold weather can sometimes have a factor on behalf of a patient. So it's an inherited disorder that mainly affects people of African and Caribbean descent.
Do we know why that is, Orin? I've wondered this before, and I don't know.
I'm not a specialist in that respect, but I do know it is actually a byproduct of people living in the sub-Saharan part of Africa, and it's a byproduct of the malaria cover that we get from it.
Is it?
Yes, it's linked to that. So nobody wants malaria,
no.
But as a byproduct, what sickle cell has done is come out of that, and it's sort of a negative byproduct of protecting us. And unfortunately, so many black people in the Caribbean, in America, in Africa. It really doesn't matter where you were born. It's where your genetics come from, and our genetics come from Africa. And we suffer with it more than most. Those of Mediterranean descent tend to suffer from something very similar called thalassemia. So you hear people talk about sickle cell and thalassemia, and it's sort of similar sort of conversation of blood disorders. Two similar but different blood disorders that affect people of different ethnicities in large numbers. And in sickle cell, it is those from African and Caribbean descent that tend to suffer the most, and it's an inherited disorder. So if both parents have the gene, if both parents have the trait, which is okay to live with, there is a chance that a child can be born who has full-blown sickle cell disorder because their parents carried the gene, and there's a risk, there's a high percentage risk that they could pass it on to unknowingly at times to the children, which is why today and for the last quite a few decades now, there's been tests you can get when parents are going forward planning to have their children. You can get tests done to see whether you are passing on the gene, especially if you have the sickle cell trait gene. So it is something that's inherited, but also education as well that is involved in trying to make sure that if we are forward planning, that we are aware of there is a risk of passing the trait onto your children.
Orin, I've got to ask you, because this is the first breakthrough in over 20 years, do you think generally enough research, medical research, has gone in to looking at, causes and effects of sickle cell?
To be honest, no. It's for many people associated with blood disorders like sickle cell, there is a strong belief that not enough research and money has been put into trying to find ways of alleviating this disorder in a practical way. In fact, the only cure for sickle cell disorder is a bone marrow or stem cell transplant. Give it its correct name. That is the ultimate cure of sickle cell disorder. But finding the match is very difficult because that's why this charity was started, because of the difficulty of finding bone marrow stem cell donors. For sickle cell patients, that is the ultimate match. But in the meantime, it shouldn't have just taken 20 years to come up with this drug to help those patients bring down the amount of crisis that they have. And so for many of us involved in this, there's, I think, a lot of disrespect in terms of acknowledging that this most highly common genetic disorder that is prevalent in the community at large, it's not been given the respect because of, some people say there's inequalities, racial overtones that's involved, and it all adds to the inequalities of health that has been widely reported that people of color, especially those from the black community, face on a day-to-day basis in this country in terms of getting the care and attention that they're due as UK taxpayers. And so the research side is all part of that. Thankfully, it is started, but really this should be for everyone who's a sickle cell patient. It should be for everyone.
Orin, how does your charity, ACLT, how does it help find bone marrow donors and how does it work?
We raise awareness via all means of communication, from face-to-face, one-to-ones, concerts, dramas, comedy shows, talking on the phone like I am with you now, podcast, video, digital. We highlight the fact that there's a strong need for finding donors, especially from ethnic minorities,
So anyone could be a donor. I could be a donor. I'm a woman of colour. I could be a donor, could I?
Anyone can be a donor by registering as a potential donor. You can register via the blood service as a blood donor. They take a little bit more and put you onto the bone marrow stem cell register. You can go through ACLT and other third parties to register. Go online and click a few clicks, and you can order a kit to be sent home. It's a cheek swab kit, like a long Q-tip.
Yeah.
And these sets of Q-tips, you just wipe the inside of your cheeks with it, and you post it back to the registry. They send you your donor card, which is a sign that you're registered. Mm-hmm. And the search is done worldwide to see whether you can match a patient around the world who's ethnically similar to you, who's looking for that match. And that's what
if I did it, say I did all this, Orin, and I was a match with someone, when my marrow is extracted, could that then reverse or cancel out their sickle cell if I do that?
That's the ultimate fix. Yes. Wow. At the moment, the ruling for sickle cell patients, it's a very tight ruling on it at the moment. In terms of they're only doing it for sibling matches for sickle cell patients at the moment. It's the hope that it can be extended to unrelated donors, because the best match for a sickle cell patient is someone that's very closely related to them, a brother or sister, a twin. An identical twin is the best match, and then you go in twins, brothers and sisters. But in the meantime, a drug like this drug that's just come out is so important. The name crisanlizumab is so important right now in the scheme of things. It's a milestone date, but it needs to be not just trialed over 5,000. It needs to cover the annual 15,000 that are there on a regular basis who are fighting, living with sickle cell, and to give them the best quality of life that's there. And that's why we are happy. This is a start, but there's so much more to do.
Orin, thank you for coming on the show. That's Orin Lewis OBE and co-founder of the charity ACLT.